I sat quietly at the banquet table, the polished silver gleaming beneath the glow of hundreds of candles. My 7-year-old grandson, Leo, sat at my side, his small hand brushing against mine every now and then as if he wanted reassurance that I was really there. The music of a live jazz band drifted through the grand ballroom, mixing with the laughter and chatter of guests who seemed to float in their fine dresses and tailored suits. It was a day meant for celebration my son's second wedding, a moment when everyone expected joy to overflow. Leo, however, was lost in his own little world. He pushed his red toy car back and forth across the snow-white tablecloth, his lips pursed, making the soft sound of vroom vroom. His big, clear eyes did not seem interested in the smiling adults or the glitter of champagne glasses raised for endless toasts. Watching him, I felt my heart soften. I reached out, gently straightening the tiny bow tie around his neck. That simple gesture pulled me back in time, back to the days when his mother, Maria, would laugh at how handsome her little boy looked dressed up. Her memory hovered near me, as real as the scent of roses that filled the room. The ballroom was dressed in grandeur rows of pristine white roses, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers, and waiters weaving between tables as if choreographed. The scene should have been perfect, but something in me could not rest. I looked around, searching for my son Alex. He was glowing with pride, moving from one table to another, his laughter loud, his smile wide. Yet I knew better. That smile, though dazzling, was a mask, an attempt to cover the emptiness Maria's absence had carved into him. At the far end of the room, Ava, his new bride, stood in her beaded wedding gown. She looked flawless, her laughter floating above the noise, her arm linked with friends who snapped endless photographs. She was radiant, almost too radiant, and her joy seemed untouched by the tragedies our family had endured. Something stirred in my chest as I watched her. I told myself not to be unfair, not to judge too quickly, but the feeling clung to me, heavy and strange. Beside me, an elderly couple leaned over and smiled warmly. "How fast Leo is growing up. How old is he now, Betty?" the gentleman asked. I smiled politely, answering softly, "He just turned 7. Time flies." I cut a piece of cake and placed it before Leo. He lifted his eyes, gratitude flashing in them, but immediately lowered his head again, pushing the toy car across the table as though that little world of his was the only place he felt safe. Then, suddenly, he froze. His tiny hands stopped their movement, and the red car sat still upon the tablecloth. His wide eyes turned to me, and for a moment I saw something that made my blood run cold, a seriousness far too heavy for a child. He grabbed my hand, his fingers icy, and whispered in a trembling voice, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." I bent down, pressing my hand gently on his shoulder. "What's wrong, my boy? Tell me, Wooded Island." He shivered, his lips pressed tightly together as if he were holding back something unbearable. Then, with a voice so low I had to lean closer, he whispered words that pierced straight through my chest. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" My breath caught. The noise of the ballroom seemed to vanish, replaced by the pounding of my heart. I tried to keep my expression calm for Leo's sake, but inside I felt a rising tide of dread I could neither name nor stop. I forced a smile, though my hands were trembling. "It's all right, sweetheart," I murmured, trying to steady my voice. "Let Grandma take a look." My words were calm, but every heartbeat thundered in my ears. Slowly, I bent forward, lifting the heavy white tablecloth with fingers that felt like they carried stones. The dim space beneath the table was filled with shadows, chair legs, polished shoes, the faint swing of Leo's feet. At first it seemed empty, and then I saw it. A folded piece of paper, so small it might have gone unnoticed, lay right beside Leo's chair. It looked innocent, yet its presence chilled me more than the autumn drafts that sometimes seep through old windows. Leo pressed against me, his breathing shallow, his tiny hand clutching my arm as if to anchor himself in a storm. My pulse quickened. I crouched all the way down, ignoring the curious looks of nearby guests, and picked up the note with unsteady hands. The room around me, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music blurred into nothing. Unfolding the paper felt like tearing open a wound. In the flickering candlelight, the words revealed themselves in hurried, uneven strokes. "Table 8. Add shrimp to the child's serving." My vision swam. My knees nearly gave way. I clutched the paper so tightly it crumpled in my palm. Shrimp Leo's fatal weakness. Everyone in the family knew his allergy. A single bite could send him into anaphylaxis, could steal him from me forever. I turned to Leo, who was watching me with terrified eyes, his lips trembling as if he already understood the danger. I pulled him close, my arms wrapping around him with a desperation that bordered on panic. His small body shook against me, and I felt the heat of his fear. Around us, the celebration went on. Oblivious. Champagne poured, laughter swelled. Ava's voice rang out like a bell as she posed for more photographs. Yet all of it felt like a cruel farce. At that moment, my world had narrowed to nothing but Leo and the scrap of paper burning in my hand. I raised my head, scanning the room. Who would do this? Who would dare to place my grandson's life at risk on a day meant for joy? My gaze swept across the smiling faces, but every smile now looked sinister, every gesture suspicious. I whispered into Leo's hair, "It's all right, my love. Grandma's here." But inside, my soul was on fire. I knew this wasn't an accident. Someone had planned it, someone cruel enough to strike in the heart of our family celebration, and I would find out who. As I held Leo close, his tiny body pressed against my chest, the weight of the moment began to crush me. The wedding hall, with its shining chandeliers and glittering glasses, blurred into insignificance. All I could feel was the frantic pounding of his little heart, echoing against mine. The paper, still clenched in my trembling fist, seemed to burn my palm. Each word etched upon it carried a death sentence. Add shrimp to the child serving. Simple words, but to me they were sharper than knives, heavier than stones. I forced myself to breathe, to calm down, to think. But in that suffocating silence inside me, memories came rushing back, flooding my mind with images of the past memories of Maria. Maria, my first daughter-in-law, the young woman whose gentle smile had lit up Alex's life. She was warmth itself, a flame that never burned but always glowed. She made our house a home, her laughter echoing down hallways that once seemed so empty. She never raised her voice, never let anger fester. Her kindness was effortless, like sunlight filtering through leaves. I remembered those afternoons in Phoenix when the desert wind swept across the yard. I would visit their little house, where Maria would greet me with vegetables freshly picked from the garden. "Mom, taste the chili I made," she would say, her eyes sparkling with pride. And I would sit with her on the porch, talking about simple things, while baby Leo crawled across the floor clutching his toy car. And then there was the night that burned itself into my soul, the night Leo burned with fever so high I feared we would lose him. Maria clutched him to her chest, tears streaking her face as she whispered, "Mom, I'm so scared." We sat together until dawn, cooling his forehead, whispering prayers. When the fever finally broke, she looked at me with swollen eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. Without you, I couldn't have made it through." I thought they were untouchable, that this little family was blessed beyond harm. But fate is cruel. That dreadful afternoon still haunts me. I was washing dishes when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold, detached. "Mrs. Williams, we regret to inform you." My hands shook so violently the plate slipped and shattered on the floor. Maria was gone. Just like that, snatched from us in an instant when a truck lost control on the highway. Her funeral was drenched in rain, the heavens weeping as much as we did. Alex collapsed by her coffin, his face hollow, his soul broken. And little Leo, only 4 years old, looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Grandma, where is my mommy?" How could I answer that? How could I tell him his mother was never coming back? From that moment on, I promised myself I would protect him, that no harm would ever come to him. Yet here I was, clutching a paper that threatened his very life, written by a hand I could not yet name. I looked at Leo's pale face, his little hands trembling, and whispered to myself, "Not again. I will not let history steal from me twice." The orchestra's tune carried on, violins sweeping gracefully as if nothing had shifted, but inside me, everything had changed. The note in my hand was not just a warning, it was a dagger pointed straight at the only piece of Maria I still had left. "Leo." I tightened my grip around him and tried to ground myself. Yet the sight of Ava, my son's new bride, glittering beneath the ballroom lights in her beaded gown, sent an uneasy ripple through my chest. Her laughter rang sharp and clear as crystal, her wineglass lifted high. She looked every bit the radiant bride, a woman whose life had just begun. And yet, every time I caught her eye, even briefly, I felt a strange chill, like a thorn pressing deeper into my heart. I tried to remind myself that I had once welcomed her into my home with cautious hope. I remembered that evening when Alex had first introduced her. I had prepared tacos and enchiladas, Leo's favorite dishes, trying to set the table for a warm family meal. Ava had walked in, charming and polite, her smile perfect, her compliments practiced. "Your house is so cozy, Mrs. Williams," she'd said, her gaze flickering too long at the photograph of Maria holding a tiny Leo. I remembered the unease that lingered as I watched her eyes trace Maria's face, something unreadable passing through them. At the dinner table, she had slid a chocolate bar toward Leo, her voice honeyed, "This is for you." But Leo had stiffened, his little shoulders rising like he was bracing against a blow. He hadn't touched the candy. Instead, he turned his face away. The boy who usually loved sweets wouldn't even look at her. I'd seen that moment. I'd felt the fear hiding in his eyes, but I had told myself not to overthink, not to cast shadows where there might be none. And now here I sat, at her wedding, holding a note that spoke of shrimp and death. "Grandma," Leo whispered again, tugging at my sleeve. His voice was faint, but his eyes were wide with terror. "Please, let's go." I brushed my hand gently over his hair, my voice low. "We will, my love, but first Grandma needs to know the truth." Because this time, I would not stay silent. I pressed the crumpled note to my chest, my eyes locked on Ava's glowing figure across the room. Around her, guests cheered, photographers flashed, laughter poured like champagne. But beneath the glamour, I felt it something wrong, something rotten. The thorn in my heart had pierced too deep to ignore. I held Leo close as though my arms alone could shield him from the invisible danger circling us. His small body trembled against me, and I whispered soothing words, though my heart was anything but calm. My eyes kept drifting toward Ava, still radiant at the far end of the room, her laughter echoing in sharp contrast to the storm gathering inside me. It was impossible not to remember how our home had once felt before she arrived. After Maria's death, silence settled in like an unwanted guest. Alex, my son, became a ghost within his own walls. He buried himself in work, leaving before dawn and returning long after Leo had fallen asleep. He thought endless hours at the office could fill the hole Maria left behind, but all it did was carve the emptiness deeper. The house, once filled with Maria's laughter, became a hollow shell. The only sparks of life came from Leo, though even he grew quieter as the months passed. He would tug at my hand at bedtime, whispering, "Grandma, tell me a story about Mommy." I would sit beside him, my voice trembling as I recalled Maria's lullabies, her gentle way of slicing fruit into tiny shapes just to make him smile. Each story was my attempt to keep her alive for him, to make sure he never forgot the love she poured into him. And then there was Lucy. Sweet, gentle Lucy, my adopted daughter, who came often with cookies or coloring books. She filled in the gaps Alex left behind. She became Leo's playmate, his teacher, sometimes even his nurse when his allergies made him weak. I often found them sitting at the kitchen table, crayons scattered everywhere, Leo showing her crooked little houses he had drawn. "Look, Aunt Lucy, mine is prettier than yours." He'd laugh, and she would clap her hands, pretending to be amazed. But I also noticed the way Lucy sometimes looked at Alex when he walked through the door, his face drawn with exhaustion. It was not the look of a sister alone, it carried something deeper, something unspoken. I never dared mention it. Our family was fragile enough. I feared even a whisper could shatter it. I tried to keep the flame of family alive, but most nights, as I watched Alex sit silently at the dinner table, pushing food around his plate, I knew we were living with wounds that would never fully heal. Leo's eyes would wander, searching for someone who wasn't there, and my own heart would ache, carrying grief that had no end. Now, on this wedding day, with Ava by his side, Alex finally wore a smile again. A smile so bright it was almost painful to see. I wanted to believe he had found joy. I wanted to believe this marriage would restore what we had lost. But deep inside me, a whisper warned, "Not all that shines is gold." And as I clutched that crumpled paper, The whisper grew louder. The music swelled, pulling me briefly back into the present, but my mind wandered again to the day Ava first entered our lives. That memory had been lingering at the edge of my thoughts ever since I saw the note. Perhaps it was fate that urged me to revisit it now, to look at it with eyes unclouded by denial. It was a bright afternoon in California. The sun spilled golden light across my small living room, casting long shadows over the photographs that lined the wall snapshots of Maria's smile, Leo's first steps, Alex's graduation day. I was in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing Leo's favorite tacos, when Alex came home earlier than usual. His face carried a glow I had not seen since Maria's passing. "Mom," he said, leaning against the doorway, his voice trembling with something more than excitement, "I want you to meet someone." My heart skipped. For years I had prayed he might find happiness again, someone to help him heal. Still, a pang of unease twisted inside me. "Someone special?" I asked. Alex's smile widened, almost boyish, full of confidence. "Yes, you're going to like her very much." I wiped my hands on my apron, steadying myself. After Maria, I wasn't sure anyone could ever fill the emptiness. Not for Alex, not for Leo, not even for me. Then Ava appeared at the door. She wore a light blue dress, elegant and perfectly pressed, her dark hair styled into gentle waves that framed her face. Her lips, painted a soft red, curved into a smile that seemed rehearsed yet undeniably beautiful. She extended her hand politely. "It's such a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Williams," she said, her voice sweet as sugar. I invited her in, offering coffee. She walked slowly around the living room, her eyes scanning the photographs. When she paused before the picture of Maria cradling a baby Leo, I noticed her smile falter for just a heartbeat before she caught herself. We sat down to dinner. I had set the table with tacos, enchiladas in red sauce, and a fresh mango salad, Leo's favorite. Alex barely looked up from Ava, his eyes fixed on her as if the rest of the world no longer existed. He spoke of her work at his company, pride brimming in his voice. Ava returned every compliment with grace, her laughter ringing like a silver bell. At one point, she leaned across the table, placing a chocolate bar in front of Leo. "This is for you," she said warmly. But Leo's reaction startled me. He stiffened, his little hands gripping his silverware tightly. His eyes avoided hers, his lips pressed in a thin line. He did not touch the chocolate. Instead, he turned his head away as if retreating into himself. Alex frowned, ready to scold. "Leo, what's wrong with you? Ava is giving you candy." I quickly intervened. "It's nothing. He's probably just tired." But inside, I felt something crack a small fissure in my trust. I told myself it was nothing, that perhaps she simply wasn't used to children, that maybe Leo was shy. And yet, that image of his fearful eyes would not leave me. That night, as Alex saw Ava out the door with glowing admiration in his eyes, I stood in the hallway, my heart weighed down by unease. It was the first thorn of doubt. And now, sitting at his wedding with that crumpled note in my hand, I realized the thorn had been warning me all along. After that first dinner, Ava returned often. Each visit seemed to paint her more firmly into Alex's life, like a carefully stitched seam he refused to see fraying at the edges. She brought flowers, she brought stories from work. She brought laughter that echoed too loudly in rooms that had once been quiet. To Alex, she was light itself. To me, she was a performance I couldn't quite trust. I remember one morning when she appeared unannounced. I was knitting by the window, the California sun spilling across the floorboards, while Leo built a tower of wooden blocks nearby. Ava entered with a radiant smile. "Mrs. Williams, I want to take Leo to the park today. Is that all right?" Her tone brimmed with enthusiasm, as if she had been waiting for the chance to prove herself. I hesitated. Leo looked up at me, his face unreadable. "Of course," I said finally, forcing a smile. "I'm sure he'll enjoy it." When they returned later, Ava's cheeks were flushed with triumph. "He had so much fun, couldn't stop going down the slide." And he begged for another ice cream. But when I looked at Leo, his shirt was smudged with dirt, his toy car clutched tightly in his hand, and his eyes downcast. He said nothing about slides, nothing about ice cream. He simply sat quietly, as though retreating behind invisible walls. I brushed his hair back gently. "Did you have fun, my boy?" He gave the faintest nod, but his eyes avoided mine. That silence said more than words ever could. Another time, while chopping onions in the kitchen, I heard Ava's voice from the living room. At first, it was soft. Then it cut sharp. "Stay still, Leo. Don't make a mess. You're a big boy now. Stop acting like a baby." The knife slipped in my hand. My heart lurched. I stepped into the room. Instantly, her tone transformed. "Our Leo is so clever," she said brightly, pointing at his block tower. "Look how tall it is." Leo's lips were pressed tight. His eyes locked on me with silent pleading. I forced a smile, though unease coiled tighter in my chest. Maybe, I told myself, she just didn't understand children yet. Maybe she was nervous. But the cracks beneath her smile were beginning to show. The final thread came at Leo's 7th birthday. Lucy had spent the morning baking his favorite chocolate cake, frosting it with care, decorating it with bright sprinkles. When she lit the candles and set it before him, Leo's face glowed for the first time in months. "Aunt Lucy, my favorite cake," he cried, hugging her tightly. Lucy kissed his hair, whispering, "I made it just for you, my love." I watched with tears in my eyes, my heart swelling. In that moment, the house felt alive again. Ava clapped politely from the corner, her smile stiff. Her only gift was a half-hearted pat on Leo's shoulder and a flat, "Happy birthday, champ." I saw the way Leo shrank, his joy faltering for just a moment, and my chest ached. I wanted to speak up. I wanted to call out the hollowness of her gesture, but I bit my tongue. I told myself not to meddle, not to sow conflict, but deep down I knew something was wrong. The weeks that followed blurred together in a rhythm that should have felt ordinary, but never quite did. Alex worked long hours as always, but when he came home, Ava was there, waiting with polished charm and carefully measured warmth. To him, she was perfect, supportive, beautiful, endlessly attentive. But I had seen enough of life to know that perfection often hid rot beneath. One afternoon, Alex decided to take Ava and Leo to the grocery store. I stayed behind, preparing stew in the kitchen, filling the house with the aroma of onions, peppers, and slow-cooked beef. When they returned, Ava's voice carried through the doorway, sharp and impatient. Leo dropped a whole bag of candy at the checkout. I had to pay for it. Such a clumsy boy. I froze mid-stir. Alex's sigh followed, heavy with disappointment. "Leo, you're a big boy now. You must be more careful." When I stepped into the room, I saw Leo standing small and silent, his head bowed, his hands twisted together. His eyes darted to me, desperate, pleading. I went straight to him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's just candy," I said softly. "Don't worry, my boy." But inside, I was far from calm. Ava's irritation was more than impatience. It was disdain cold, cutting disdain for a child who had already endured too much. Soon after, Leo's teacher pulled me aside one morning as I picked him up from school. Her voice was low, careful, but laced with concern. "Mrs. Williams, Leo has seemed withdrawn lately. He hardly talks, doesn't engage with the other children. Is something happening at home?" My throat tightened. "It's only the changes," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Please don't worry." But on the way home, Leo tugged at my blouse, his little voice trembling. "Grandma, I don't want to go home with Miss Ava." The words sliced through me. I knelt, looking into his eyes, those wide, clear eyes that mirrored Maria's. "Why do you say that, my love? Miss Ava cares for you." He shook his head firmly. "No, Grandma, she doesn't love me." I wanted to argue. I wanted to reassure him. But deep inside, I knew he was right. Children see truth with eyes unclouded by excuses. Lucy, walking just a few steps behind us, heard everything. She turned away, silent, her shoulders trembling as though she carried a weight she could not voice. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, the shadows shifting with every flicker of the streetlight outside. The signs were there. All along they had been there. Leo's fear, his silence, his shrinking joy. And now, the note at the wedding, the terrible, damning note. The whispers of doubt had grown too loud to ignore. The golden Florida sun streamed through the tall windows of the ballroom that afternoon, bathing everything in a warm, almost sacred glow. It was supposed to be a day of new beginnings, a day for my son to reclaim happiness after so many years of grief. The guests buzzed with excitement, their voices weaving together like threads of silk, while the jazz band played softly in the background. I sat at table number 8 with Leo on my right, and Lucy, my steadfast adopted daughter, on my left. The boy was busy rolling his red toy car across the crisp white tablecloth, whispering "vroom vroom" under his breath. Lucy leaned over every so often, breaking off a piece of bread to offer him. "Eat a little more, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice carrying the warmth of morning sunlight. Watching them, I felt a fragile peace bloom inside me. Though our family had suffered storms, moments like this reminded me of the love that still tethered us together. Alex, dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, moved gracefully from table to table, his glass raised high. His face was radiant, his smile wide, his laughter booming. To everyone watching, he was the image of a man reborn, his sorrows left behind. And then there was Ava. She stood across the room, dazzling in her beaded wedding gown, her lips curved into a smile as bright as the diamonds on her neck. Cameras flashed around her as she raised her glass, never once letting go of her aura of perfection. Yet when her gaze briefly flicked toward our table, I noticed something, a tightness in her expression, so fleeting it might have gone unseen. But I saw it. I always saw. The waiters began circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Plates of crackers, aromatic cheese, and bowls of fresh shrimp glistened under the candlelight. My eyes instinctively fell to Leo. He picked a cracker and then, with deliberate care, pushed the shrimp platter away. I frowned, leaning closer. "Don't you like this, my love?" Leo shook his head quickly, avoiding my gaze, his little fingers tightening around his toy car. I wanted to press further, but before I could, a relative leaned over with a cheerful voice. "Look how well-behaved Leo is. Such a fine young man." I forced a smile, but unease twisted in my chest. Leo had never turned away food with such intensity before. His silence was louder than words. When I looked up again, Ava's eyes were on us. For the briefest moment, her perfect smile faltered, her lips tightening ever so slightly before she turned away, laughing with another guest. And then, as though fate itself had been waiting, Leo's toy car slipped from the table and rolled onto the floor. He bent down quickly to retrieve it and froze. His body stiffened, his small face went pale, and his wide eyes locked on something beneath the table. Before I could ask, his trembling hands pulled out a folded piece of paper. He clung to me instantly, whispering with urgency, "Grandma, let's go. Please, let's go now." My heart thundered. I took the note from him, the edges damp with his sweaty fingers. With shaking hands, I opened it. The words stared back at me like a curse. Table 8. Add shrimp to the child's serving. The music, the laughter, the toasts, all of it collapsed into silence inside me. Someone wanted my grandson dead. The words blurred before my eyes, though I had read them only once. Table 8. Add shrimp to the child's serving. So simple, so casual, yet filled with murderous intent. My fingers tightened around the slip of paper until it crumpled, my knuckles whitening with the pressure. I pulled Leo closer, his small body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. "Grandma, please," he whispered again, his voice breaking. "I don't want to stay here." I stroked his hair, trying to steady him and myself. "It's all right, my love," I murmured, though my own chest ached with fear. "I'll keep you safe." But the vow felt hollow when the threat was already written, tangible, clutched in my hand. Around us, the ballroom buzzed with life. Glasses clinked, laughter spilled, waiters glided with trays held high. It was as if the entire world remained blind to the trap set right beneath its glow. My eyes darted across the tables. Who could write such a thing? My mind painted every smiling guest as a suspect, every toast as a distraction, every shadow as danger. I glanced at Lucy. She was watching me carefully, her expression tightening as she noticed the fear in my face. Without a word, I slid the paper toward her beneath the table. Her eyes scanned the message, and I watched the color drain from her cheeks. She looked at Leo, then back at me, and shook her head slowly, disbelief flickering into horror. "Stay with him," I whispered, my voice firm though it trembled. She pulled Leo close, her arms wrapping around him like a shield. "Where are you going?" she asked under her breath. "To find out who did this," I replied, rising to my feet. My legs felt heavy, as if weighed down by lead, but something inside me pushed forward. I couldn't sit idle. If I stayed silent, I would carry that guilt forever. I moved toward the back of the ballroom where a group of waiters gathered near the bar, laughing softly between serving courses. Their white uniforms gleamed under the lights, their trays polished, their smiles easy. Yet in my hand was proof that someone among them carried instructions to poison my grandson. My eyes landed on David, the young waiter who had been by our table several times that evening. He looked kind, almost boyish, but kindness was a mask I no longer trusted. I walked straight up to him and shoved the paper before his eyes. My voice came out low and sharp, trembling with rage and fear. "Do you know who gave you this?" David's carefree smile faltered. His eyes widened, his face paling as though the life had drained out of him. His lips parted in a stammer. "My God, this is mine. I dropped it when I was carrying the tray. A woman gave it to me." His hands shook as though he wished to snatch the note back and erase the evidence. The room seemed to tilt. "Who?" I pressed, my voice breaking into a harsh whisper. "Who gave you this paper?" David swallowed hard, taking a step back. I don't know her name, ma'am. She only told me to pass it to the chef." Around us, the other waiters had fallen silent, their gazes flicking between David and me, unease spreading like ripples in water. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the music. I tightened my grip on the note. If he didn't know the name, then someone had ensured their hands stayed clean. Someone in this room, perhaps only a few steps away, had planned to kill Leo, and I would not rest until I found them. I stood frozen, gripping the note so tightly it felt as if it might fuse into my skin. David's words rang in my ears, echoing over the chatter of guests and the swell of music. "A woman gave it to me. I don't know her name." The air felt heavy, suffocating, and I could barely draw breath. I forced myself to focus. There was no time for hesitation. Leo's life depended on it. I turned on my heel and strode back toward table 8. My steps were shaky, but my resolve sharpened with every beat of my heart. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight and laughter, but all I could see was Leo, huddled against Lucy, his wide eyes searching for me as if I alone could save him from the shadows. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair gently. "I've got you, my love," I whispered, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my fear. Lucy's eyes burned into mine, silently demanding answers. I straightened, inhaled deeply, and before I could lose my courage, I raised my voice. "One moment, please." The words cut through the music, slicing it clean in half. The jazz band faltered, the murmur of conversation died. Heads turned, eyes locked on me. A hush fell across the ballroom, so thick you could hear the faint crackle of candle flames. I held up the crumpled slip of paper. My voice shook, but I forced it to carry across the hall. This was found under our table. Someone instructed that shrimp be added to the child serving at table 8. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few guests exchanged bewildered looks. Others muttered in disbelief. The weight of their stares pressed against me, but I stood firm. Alex rushed over, confusion etched into his features. "Mom? What's going on?" His voice carried a note of panic. "Read it," I said, thrusting the paper toward him. My hands trembled, but my eyes did not waver. He unfolded the note, his face draining of color as the words registered. His jaw tightened, his hands shook. What is this supposed to mean? Before I could answer, Ava glided forward, her beaded dress glittering as she moved. Her brows knitted, her lips parted in what looked like shock. "What is all this?" she asked in a soft, carefully measured voice. Some kind of bad joke? But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes. Panic. My throat burned as I spoke. "My grandson is severely allergic to shrimp. A single bite could kill him. This is no joke. This is attempted murder." The silence that followed was deafening. Guests sat stunned, some covering their mouths in horror, others turning to whisper in frantic tones. All eyes shifted toward Ava. She let out a brittle laugh, shaking her head as though I were a confused old woman. "Mrs. Williams, there's no name on that paper. Are you really going to accuse me based on a scrap of handwriting?" Murmurs swelled again, doubt mixing with curiosity. But before I could speak, Lucy rose from her seat, clutching Leo to her chest. Her voice cut through the tension, sharp and unwavering. "That's enough, Ava." She stepped forward, her hand trembling but her eyes blazing with fury. And then, with a sound that cracked across the ballroom like lightning, Lucy slapped her. The hall erupted into gasps. Glasses clinked, someone dropped a fork, and for a moment even the chandeliers seemed to tremble. Ava's hand flew to her cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You see?" she cried, her voice quivering. "She's jealous. She's attacking me for no reason." But Lucy's voice thundered, filled with raw pain. "Jealous? You tried to poison a child on his father's wedding day. There's no jealousy in this only truth." The guests erupted in whispers, their eyes darting between Ava and the paper in Alex's hands. Doubt turned into suspicion, suspicion into judgment, and I knew then this night would not end with vows of love and celebration. It would end with revelation, with truth laid bare like shattered glass on marble floors. The ballroom pulsed with tension, the kind that makes the air thick and heavy in your chest. Lucy stood tall, clutching Leo protectively, her hands still trembling from the force of the slap. Guests shifted in their seats, their whispers rising like waves threatening to crash over Ava's carefully constructed facade. Ava's perfect smile faltered. Her hand remained pressed against her cheek, her eyes flicking rapidly between the guests, Alex, and me. "This is madness," she said finally, her voice high, sharp. "Are we really going to ruin the most important day of our lives over a child's fantasy and an old woman's paranoia?" Her words stung, but I stood straighter, my voice cold. "This is no fantasy. This paper was placed beneath Leo's chair. Someone wanted him dead." I held it up again, my trembling hands firming as I let the words hang in the air. Alex's face was ashen, torn between disbelief and terror. He turned to Ava, his voice raw. "Tell me this isn't true." She reached for his hand desperately. "Alex, of course it isn't. Don't you see? They're trying to destroy us. Your sister, your adopted sister, she's always been jealous of me. Look at her, clinging to Leo like he's hers. This is her doing." Lucy's eyes burned with fury. "How dare you? Everything I've ever done has been for Leo's safety, for this family's peace. You're the one who brought danger into this room." Her voice shook, but it was the tremble of righteous anger, not weakness. A hush fell again as another voice broke through the young waiter, David. He stepped forward from the corner, his face pale, his hands wringing nervously. I need to say something." All eyes turned toward him. He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "That paper, it's real. A woman gave it to me. She told me to hand it to the chef. I dropped it by accident near table 8. I didn't know what it said. Not until now." Gasps swept the room. The murmurs grew louder, some guests shaking their heads, others staring openly at Ava. Ava's mask slipped further. Her lips tightened, her breath came quicker, and for the first time her confidence cracked. "Lies," she spat, her voice trembling. "All of you are conspiring against me." But then, from the back of the room, a trembling cry shattered the air. "It wasn't me who gave it to the waiter," a young girl's voice called out. "It was Ava." Heads whipped around. Ava's younger sister, Gloria, stood from her seat, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her small body shook as she sobbed. "She asked me to give the note to him. I didn't know what it was. I swear, I didn't know." The ballroom erupted in chaos, guests rising to their feet, gasping, voices clashing in disbelief. Some shouted, others covered their mouths, and the band's instruments fell silent. I stared at Ava, my heart thundering. Her mask had not just cracked, it had shattered. Her perfect smile, her polished charm, her carefully rehearsed performance all gone. What remained was the truth, ugly and undeniable. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Gloria's trembling confession hung in the air like smoke. No one could breathe. Her face was pale, her tears streaking down as she clutched her dress, her entire body shaking. "She asked me," Gloria repeated, her voice breaking. "Ava gave me that note and told me to hand it to the waiter. I didn't know it was about Leo. I didn't know." A hush rippled through the hall. The whispers that followed were not of curiosity anymore. They were sharp, condemning, heavy with judgment. I turned to Ava, my chest burning. "Is this true?" I demanded, my voice echoing across the marble and chandeliers. Ava's eyes widened, her perfect composure fracturing. She spun toward Gloria, her face twisted with fury. "Shut your mouth," she hissed, her voice shrill. "You're lying to humiliate me. How dare you betray your own sister?" Gloria sobbed harder, backing away as if Ava's anger could cut her like glass. I'm not lying. You told me to do it. You said it was important." Her words came out in gasps, each one like a dagger to Ava's carefully woven image. The guests recoiled. Some muttered in disgust. Others shook their heads, unable to believe such wickedness could be planned on a day meant for love. Alex's face was stricken, his hands trembling as he clutched the note. "Ava, tell me the truth, please." His voice cracked, desperate, as though he clung to the faintest hope that this was all some cruel mistake. Ava's lips trembled. For the first time, she had no ready smile, no polished excuse. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, for someone to defend her. But all she found were stares hard, accusing, merciless. Her mask slipped entirely. "You don't understand," she cried suddenly, her voice breaking. "You don't know what it's like to live in someone else's shadow, to always be second, no matter what you do." Her eyes darted toward Leo, her face contorting. "He was never going to be mine, never." The words struck like thunder. The guests gasped again, some covering their mouths in horror. Lucy pulled Leo tighter against her chest, her eyes blazing with rage. "How could you?" Lucy spat, her voice trembling with both fury and pain. "He's a child, an innocent child. You wanted to hurt him because of your jealousy?" Ava's shoulders shook, her once perfect exterior collapsing into fragments of bitterness. "You all think I'm cruel," she shouted, her voice ragged. "But no one cared about me. No one cared how hard it was to step into Maria's shadow, to hear her name in every breath, every story, every glance Alex gave that boy." Her words twisted through the hall, poisoning the air. But to me they were nothing but proof that beneath her jeweled gown and flawless smile, darkness had always been waiting. The hall fell into stunned silence. And in that silence, Alex took a single step back from her. His face, once filled with devotion, was now pale with horror. His eyes locked on her not with love, but with betrayal. The unmasking was complete. Ava had shown herself, and there was no going back. The silence that followed Ava's outburst was heavier than any music could fill. The chandeliers glittered above, but the light felt cold, like frost on glass. Guests sat stiffly in their seats, some leaning forward in disbelief, others recoiling as though afraid to breathe the same air. Alex's hand trembled at his side. He stared at the woman he had just vowed to love, his lips parted but no words coming out. The navy blue suit that had made him shine hours ago now seemed to weigh him down, suffocating him in shame. "Ava," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his eyes searching hers for even a scrap of denial. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't." His throat tightened, unable to finish. Ava stepped toward him, her jeweled gown rustling like broken glass. "Alex, please, you have to understand," she begged, her voice quivering. "I only wanted to protect what was ours. You, me, our future. Leo. Leo was always in the way. He's a constant reminder of Maria. I couldn't compete with her ghost anymore." Gasps erupted across the room. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. A man muttered harshly, "Unbelievable," on his wedding day. Lucy's arms tightened protectively around Leo, whose small face was pressed against her shoulder. His toy car clutched between trembling fingers. She lifted her head, her eyes like steel. "You call that love?" she hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "Love does not destroy a child. Love does not poison innocence." Ava spun toward Lucy, her eyes blazing. "And what do you know about love? You've always wanted Alex, haven't you? You've always hovered, pretending to be a sister, when deep down you were nothing but a jealous intruder." Lucy flinched as if struck, but her grip on Leo did not falter. Her voice cracked, trembling yet resolute. "If protecting Leo makes me an intruder, then so be it. I will stand in front of him every time, even if it means standing against you." The ballroom erupted into chaos, some guests shouting, others rising from their seats. The band members had set down their instruments, watching wide-eyed, their music silenced by scandal. I slammed my hand against the table, my voice ringing through the room. "Enough!" The hall fell still again. My chest rose and fell rapidly, but my words carried clear. "You wanted to destroy my grandson, Ava. On this very day, when you should have been joining our family, you tried to tear it apart. Whatever vows were spoken today are ashes. You will never, ever be part of this family." A hush swept over the room like a final curtain falling. Ava's face drained of color. She looked at Alex, desperation etched into every line of her face. "Alex, you can't let them do this to me. You love me. You said you loved me." Alex's eyes brimmed with tears. He shook his head slowly, his voice breaking. "I loved who I thought you were. But the woman standing before me, I don't even know her." The vows had shattered, and with them, Ava's mask, her future, her place in our lives gone, all in an instant. Ava staggered back a step as if Alex's words had struck her harder than Lucy's slap. Her painted lips trembled. Her jeweled gown no longer gleamed but clung to her like a costume stripped of its magic. She looked around the hall, searching desperately for sympathy, for even a single hand stretched toward her. None came. The guests' faces had hardened, some pale with shock, others flushed with anger. I could hear their whispers cutting like knives. How could she, on his wedding day? A child, no less. Unforgivable. Leo peeked from Lucy's shoulder, his small face pale, his wide eyes glistening. When his gaze met Ava's, he shrank back again, clutching his toy car so tightly his knuckles whitened. My heart broke at the sight. That fear, raw and unfiltered, was proof enough for me. Alex took a step closer to Ava, his voice trembling but firm. "You tried to harm my son." He raised the crumpled note, his hand shaking. This is all the proof I need. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed Leo. You betrayed my family." Ava shook her head frantically, her voice rising into hysteria. "No, I was desperate, Alex. Don't you see? I just wanted you all to myself. I wanted a life where Maria's shadow didn't haunt every corner. I couldn't bear it anymore, seeing her in Leo's eyes, hearing her name in every sigh, every story." Her confession was raw, ugly, and absolute. The hall filled with horrified murmurs. A man near the back shouted, "You could have killed him!" Others joined, voices rising like a storm. I stepped forward, my voice steady though my chest shook with fury. "Ava, love built on jealousy is not love, it's poison. And tonight, you showed us all what poison you carry." Lucy's voice cut through mine, trembling with rage. "If you cannot bear Maria's shadow, then you cannot bear Leo. And if you cannot bear Leo, you have no place here." She clutched him closer, her eyes fierce, daring Ava to deny it. The weight of judgment bore down, and Ava's defiance began to crack. Her shoulders slumped, her breath came ragged. Tears spilled not of remorse, but of defeat. She looked once more at Alex, her voice breaking into a whisper. "You were supposed to be mine." Alex closed his eyes, shaking his head, a single tear rolling down his cheek. "I was never yours if it meant losing my son." The final blow had been struck not by hand, but by truth. The woman who had walked into this hall as a bride now stood exposed, stripped of love, stripped of dignity, with nothing but her guilt laid bare before all. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. What had begun as a wedding now lay in ruins, littered with whispers and broken hearts. The scent of roses and wine still lingered in the air, but it could not mask the bitterness that hung heavier than smoke. Security staff, alerted by the commotion, stepped quietly into the hall. One of them approached Ava, his tone polite but firm. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us." Ava's eyes widened in panic. She turned to Alex, her voice rising in desperation. "Alex, don't let them do this. You love me. You said you loved me." Alex didn't answer. He stood still, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. His eyes were fixed on Leo, who sat trembling in Lucy's arms. Slowly, Alex reached out and brushed his son's hair, his voice breaking. "I almost lost you today." His words were not loud, but they carried across the hushed room. Ava tried to pull away from the guards, her cries shrill and fractured. "You'll regret this, all of you!" But no one moved to her defense. Guests turned their faces away, some shaking their heads in disgust. Others whispered prayers under their breath, horrified at the evil that had nearly unfolded before their eyes. As Ava was escorted out, her jeweled gown trailing like a torn banner behind her, the hall remained silent. Only the faint sobs of her sister Gloria could be heard. The girl crumpled in her chair, guilt and confusion weighing on her fragile frame. Leo tugged gently at my sleeve. His voice was small, but it pierced straight into my heart. Grandma, am I safe now? I hugged him tightly, my tears soaking into his hair. Yes, my love, you're safe. I promise you're safe. Lucy leaned into us, her arms wrapping around both of us, forming a shield as strong as steel. She whispered fiercely, "No one will ever hurt you again, Leo. Not while I'm here." The guests began to leave quietly, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. Plates of food remained untouched, glasses half empty, the celebration abandoned. What lingered instead was the knowledge that a child's life had nearly been stolen, and the woman meant to be celebrated as a bride had been revealed as a villain. Alex finally turned toward me. His eyes were hollow, red from holding back tears. "Mom, I don't know how to face this, how to face everyone." I placed my hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "You don't need to face everyone. You need only face your son. He is the only one who matters." He nodded slowly, his lips trembling. He pulled Leo into his arms, holding him so tightly I feared he might never let go. Leo buried his face into his father's chest, and for the first time in years, Alex's tears flowed freely. The night had ended in disaster. But in that disaster, truths had been revealed, masks stripped away, and bonds, though shaken, had begun to heal. Still, the wound Ava left behind would not close quickly. The aftermath of her betrayal would ripple through our lives for years to come, and I, as both mother and grandmother, would carry the weight of ensuring those ripples did not drown us. The days after the wedding passed like a blur. Phone calls came in from every direction, relatives, friends, even neighbors who had heard the whispers before the cake had time to be cleared from the tables. Some called to console, others to question, and a few to judge. But to me, every call was only a reminder of how close I had come to losing Leo. The house itself felt different. The flowers Alex had brought home for the occasion wilted quickly, their petals scattering across the floor like echoes of a happiness that never truly belonged to us. Ava's name was no longer spoken aloud, as if even the sound of it could stain the air. Alex withdrew into silence. He drove Leo to school in the mornings, picked him up in the afternoons, and sat with him at night, staring into the boy's eyes as though searching for forgiveness he could not bring himself to ask for. Guilt carved shadows into his face, aging him more than grief ever had. I tried to keep the routines alive. I cooked Leo's favorite pasta, told him bedtime stories about Maria, and hummed the lullabies she once sang. But the one who truly stitched the wounds back together was Lucy. Every morning she packed Leo's lunch with careful hands, slipping in notes scribbled with smiling faces and gentle reminders. "Don't forget, no shrimp. Aunt Lucy loves you." Each time Leo opened his lunchbox at school, his classmates giggled at the drawings, and his little eyes lit up again. In the afternoons, she took him to the park, teaching him how to fly kites, how to laugh again without fear. When he fell, she brushed him off, whispering, "It's okay, my love. I'm right here." And every night, when fevers returned or nightmares woke him, she sat by his bed with damp cloths and soft stories of sparrows braving storms. One evening, as we sat together for dinner, Leo looked up with those clear eyes that held more wisdom than any child should carry. His voice was small but steady. "I want Aunt Lucy to be my mommy." The room fell silent. Lucy froze, her cheeks flushed, her spoon clutched tightly as though to anchor herself. Alex's eyes filled instantly with tears, his breath catching in his throat. I reached across the table, placing my hand on his. "True happiness, son," I said softly, "doesn't come from dazzling dresses or glittering halls. It comes from a heart that loves sincerely, quietly, every single day." Alex's gaze shifted to Lucy, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not just gratitude, not just remorse, but hope. Outside, the silver moon climbed high, spilling its gentle light across our quiet street. In that fragile glow, I felt it a dawn struggling to rise from the wreckage of betrayal. The scars would remain, yes. The pain would linger. But as long as we held together, as long as love outweighed shadows, there was still a path forward. A fragile dawn, but a dawn nonetheless. In the quiet nights that followed, when the noise of the world fell away, I often sat by the window with Leo asleep in the next room. I would watch the moon stretch its silver glow across the street and think about everything we had endured. The betrayal, the near loss, the mask of love that turned out to be poisoned, all replayed in my mind like a haunting melody. But then I would hear it. Leo's soft breathing, the rustle of his blankets as he turned in his sleep, the faintest murmur of his dreams. That sound reminded me why we fight, why we endure. For the ones who cannot protect themselves, for the children who trust us blindly with their fragile lives. I realized then that family is not just the blood that binds us. It is the choices we make, the sacrifices we bear, and the courage to stand when silence would be easier. Lucy, with her steady hands and boundless heart, had proven that truth more than anyone, and perhaps in time Alex would see that too. To those listening now, I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent for the sake of peace, or would you have risked everything to speak out? Because sometimes a single act of courage, a hand raised, a voice refusing to be silenced can change everything. And if this story has reached your heart, I ask you to share it. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, what does family mean to you? Remember to subscribe so you can hear more stories that remind us we are not alone in our struggles. Every story we share is a candle in the darkness lighting the way for someone else. Until next time, may courage guide your steps and may love protect your home.